I still remember where I was when Modern Warfare 2 came out, and you're thinking, Kevin, that was like a month ago. I was in Walmart buying the damn thing. No, no, no. The PS3 was warmed up and scratched to shit because it's glossy. And Uncharted came out. Actually, I think it was Uncharted 2, and I would flip-flop between those two games until my knuckles crumpled to dust. Now, I don't have that level of passion or intensity for 2022 MW2. I will say it's the best COD entry in the franchise in several years. And after Vanguard, this was a breath of fresh air to remind me that COD titles don't always suffer quality control issues from that annual release cycle. Only 95% of the time. That's why this is the last back-to-back annual release for a while. Give Treyarch, Infinity Ward, Raven Software, Sledgehammer, and Big Daddy AB a little break from the COD franchise, please. The story is one rung down from Cold War and 2019 Modern Warfare, but definitely a step up from what we saw with Vanguard. Performance on the PS5 was rock solid, holding 120 frames per second almost the entire game. And despite an annoying noir-style gritty film grain that simply couldn't be turned off, the graphics looked insane. The shooting is snappy and tight, what you would expect from the pinnacle of FPS. But then you peel back the surface area of this game, that being the campaign or story mode, and realize that this game is jam-packed full of content. This ain't Black Ops, so there's no zombie modes or anything, but you do have a couch co-op Spec Ops mode, a robust traditional multiplayer with your objective-based team matches, an insane weapons builder, and a pretty good selection of maps and modes. Then for you Battle Royale renegades, Warzone 2.0 kicks off with a brand new map and basically a complete reworking, which is what we needed after being stuck on Verdansk for years. Is that it, Kevin? That's pretty on par for like every Call of Duty game. We ain't talked about DMZ yet. Some gamers are saying it's like Destiny 2 because it's got PvE or player versus environment and you're basically doing missions. Many others compare it to Escape from Tarkov because it's a drop-in and extraction shooter where you're fighting AI, kind of like scavs, and then also real players like PMCs. Both of those comparisons are a huge stretch, and I will advise caution because you will pull a hamstring trying to compare those two games to MW2. Without further ado, let's review MW2 on a multitude of categories and find out if it lives up to the name first fisted into the franchise in 2009. My biggest complaint with Modern Warfare 2 right out of the gate, just launching the game, is how online driven the game is, and the fact that the campaign and virtually all modes other than Warzone 2.0, that is tacked on as some kind of an afterthought, or like, you might want to check this out when you're not playing Warzone 2.0. And just the process of even getting to the campaign, you have to dig through multiple submenus and then install the campaign as if it's DLC or add-on. In fact, they even call it campaign add-on files. And in order to just play the offline story mode, which there is no offline anything, you have to sign in to do anything, virtually tinker with your settings. Go ahead and sign in, why don't you? Make sure your account's active. And that initial startup, you've got to read through two very long user agreements. You can't just hotkey skip over it or anything like that. Go ahead and bust out your monocle or your reading glasses and just get to the bottom of it. I will say it was a pretty unsavory about 45 minutes when I went to initially start the game. Just literally digging, busting out my shovel, digging to try and find where the fuck is the actual story mode, the offline, the campaign. That's what I start with. And then I get into the co-op or the zombies, the multiplayer, the BR, all that stuff after I play through the campaign. Let's not veer away from tradition. There's no reason to. But as soon as I launched the game and actually started playing, all of that frustration faded away in about 5 minutes. And within about, I would say 10 minutes, I knew I was in for quite a ride. And within about 15 minutes, I knew that I liked this COD entry more than anything I'd seen in about 3 years. And in about 4 hours, I was passed out on the couch with drool down my chest and my controller batteries flickering. Let's start with the story because that's what I always start with when I get a Call of Duty title. I know, unfortunately, a lot of gamers pick up COD and never even touch the story or campaign, but there's been some insane memorable moments over the years that you just simply shouldn't have missed. And luckily, this campaign falls in line. Shoot, while it's fresh off my mind, you're hanging over a highway by your ankles, getting drugged by a helicopter, shooting a pistol at motorcycles, trying to clip your dome piece. That's a memory that'll stick with me for years. A newly re-envisioned wetwork mission where you're on a cargo ship where the actual metal containers are shifting around, so not only is cover moving while you're trying to shoot and steady your aim, but those things will squish you. There's cargo in those things. They're metal, you're flesh, they're trying to squish you. It's crazy. Adds another dynamic layer to the gunfights. I like that a lot. Now, average playtime is very hard to estimate with the Modern Warfare 2 story because there are some huge wide open maps where you can either stealth approach or you can just run and gun. but they're massive. So it's going to take you like 30, 45 minutes to complete these missions. I'm telling you, there's some very long missions because the set pieces, the sandboxes that you're in are huge, and you probably will die quite a few times, even on normal difficulty. We'll talk about that during the gameplay section because I think the out of the box challenge at normal mode is actually really good. Average playtime's hard to estimate, but I'm hearing between 6 and 9 hours. I completed the story mode in a little under 7, and I was pretty much just trying to beeline it through the main story. I did stop and like look at some of the beautiful vistas and absorb the gorgeous environments and stuff like that. There's no real like side quests or side missions or anything. This isn't Skyrim. Actually, there were like side quests and side missions in Cold War in 2020. You had that Black Ops board where you could do covert missions on the side and stuff. This ain't like that. Just linear storyline missions in order that you have to go through. And while there are some memorable moments, I will say that the story, the plot is a little bit weak, a little bit flaccid because you have a pretty generic bad guy. Granted, he's a douche canoe. He's got a real punchable face. He seems kind of like a frat boy that got into spec ops. It just, I don't know, he irked me the wrong way. But that's all I can say for him though. He irked me the wrong way. I don't really think he was well written, and I can summarize the story with no spoilers by saying generic asshole bad guy obtains missiles, wants to launch him down the world's suckhole. You stop it, roll credits. Granted, that's a savage oversimplification because you have some awesome voice acting as well as some very memorable characters from the previous games like Soap and Ghost. And I also feel like the ending, not the ending cutscene, the little movie that you're watching, but the last mission, the last, squeeze of the trigger, so to speak, was a little bit underwhelming, and it didn't have that big final punch that you get from some Call of Duty campaigns where you're like, holy moly, you're literally sweating and you need to take a breather and maybe take a lap around your house and stuff to like get your heart rate down. You didn't get that here. You were like, ooh, that's it? It's over? Granted, the last cutscene when you see, no spoilers, pretty cool because it sets up the next game, probably going to be called Modern Warfare 3, not to confuse you with the PS3 title. The story's a 6.5 out of 10 for me. It was very difficult. I went back and forth. Is it a 6? Is it a 7? I even pushed up to an 8 for a while. And then I was like, it does lose pacing a little bit during the middle. And like I said, the writing of the villain was pretty whack. And then the ending just left me not really like, whoa, blowing my hair back or anything. So 6.5 out of 10. So as for gameplay, not the combat, not the shooting, we know that's going to be crisp and tight, but that's a different section of the review. But as for the gameplay, you do have some stealth scenes. However, they're not mandatory stealth. There's only like, I think 2 mandatory stealth sections, and it makes sense that like, hey, if you got seen here, it'd be over. I don't think the gameplay was quite as interesting as Cold War, where you had all the 80s covert gadgets and gear with the little tiny cameras and stuff. You were collecting intel, and it was spicy. Yeah, you didn't really get that here. I'm gonna go ahead and give gameplay 6 out of 10. As for combat, we would expect it to be the pinnacle of the first-person shooter genre, and it definitely is. It feels crisp, it feels tight. You have a ton of options and settings, whether you're on keyboard and mouse or controller, gamepad, things like dead zone, sensitivity, as well as sensitivity response curves and fine-tuning of your aim assist. I will say normal mode presented much more of a challenge than traditional COD games do for me. I generally bump it up to hardened. Hardened is the hard mode, right? One up from the middle. Yeah. Just to add a little sugar and spice where I'm feeling like I'm having to pop out of corners and play a little bit more tight instead of just, kicking back on my playthrough like this, which I don't mind. But I died quite a darn bit on normal mode, and that is because enemy AI is actually pretty good. They communicate with each other very well. They'll flank you. They'll work together as a team. They did add a new enemy type, which is armored enemies. So if you're used to cracking through armor plates on Warzone, it's the same sound effect. You also get that visual cue of an armor plate cracking. You can also armor up during certain sections. Same thing, you hold down triangle, you're gonna slip plates into your vest. Now this is a very mixed sack for me. There's a couple missions where I enjoyed those armored enemies because it added another layer to the gunfights, where you realize, ooh, I'm gonna have to dump an entire mag into him, but I can kill all 3 of these guys with 1 mag. So it kind of makes you approach fights differently. Plus it's just satisfying to dump rounds into these huge juggernauts and watch their armor crack and then them fall over. But I would say more often than what I just explained there, where it's actually enjoyable, it's more of a nuisance. Belongs in multiplayer or BR to me, and it just, most of the time it was frustrating to me, to be honest, because they seemed a little bit too bullet spongy, and I get that's the entire, what they're supposed to do because they're armored, but it didn't really add to much. I would say. I will say that during the story playthrough, items and equipment feel like they were much more important. You now have a crafting system, which I've never seen in a COD game. I thought I was playing Far Cry. I had to double check the box. I even went back to the home menu on the PS5 to make sure I installed the right game. Crafting, literally, you're collecting bolts and bindings, and then you pop up a little crafting wheel and make a shiv. So I thought the crafting and just being able to quickly swap between items was really cool. What's not really cool is sometime along the years, I don't know exactly when this happened, but it sure as hell did, Call of Duty lost the licensing or the rights to use real-world firearm or gun names, AK-47, M16, etc. So when you first play this game and you've got a stack of bodies in front of you and you're trying to select what weapon you'd like to pick up and you're like, do I want the Tomahawk Knuckle Smacker? Oh, a Gum Smacker 16. I heard these are good. Oh, but there's bigger magazines on the back flat Bugatti over there. Like, what are these weapons I'm picking up off the ground or strippers? We've got the Glitter 45 and we got the Passion 9mm. I'm gonna level them both up. You've got this awesome gunsmithing system where you can customize everything about the firearm. I mean, we're rivaling Escape from Tarkov over here. Sorry, Nikita, I'm just kidding. But then you pan your eyes up to the top of the screen and you're like, ooh, cool. I just spent 45 minutes customizing my Tamagotchi pom-pom, or whatever the gun's called. Something stupid. The graphics hold a level of polish that you would expect from a blockbuster AAA release from a massive studio like Activision Blizzard with multiple subsidiary studios. But we do have a couple of graphical issues, unfortunately. There is this constant film grain, this kind of noir style, gritty haze that you simply cannot deactivate. You can go into the settings, into graphics, and deactivate two types of motion blur, world motion blur, and I believe weapon motion blur, which of course, one of the first things I turned off. I will say world motion blur turned itself back on automatically every single time I launched the game. It still does to this day. I have to manually go into my settings and turn it off every time, and it makes the game look a lot better. But there's this stupid film grain, which I actually think I understand why it was implemented. I think it needed to be, honestly. I think it needs to be in place. I think if you remove it, I think it would maybe look worse because of the way the facial animations and everything was done. I don't know. I'm gonna leave it to Digital Foundry to get nuts deep inside of the technical specifications of the graphics and like literally blow up the screen to 16K and analyze pixel density and stuff. But I will tell you this right now. There was some weird reflections that occurred constantly off of a lot of shiny textures. Not my weapon, luckily. That's good. Things in the environment would look really weird. Like it almost would look shimmery or like a holographic Pokemon card, like foil. Like I'm looking at foil. And this would happen a lot. Also, I did see quite a bit of texture and asset pop in. Texture meaning you're looking at a wall, it looks completely smooth, and then boom, it pops in and it's got like cracks and scratches and stuff. It's a little bit jarring and takes you out of the immersion. And then asset pop in is when objects literally pop in front of you. So you turn real quick and the game world loads in a tree and a rock that wasn't there. If those graphical issues didn't exist, this would be the most beautiful game that I have played on PS5 to date, as we're currently that belong to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but that's like a 3D cartoon Pixar style game, and Modern Warfare 2 is a photorealistic graphical powerhouse during the cutscenes, honestly pushing that threshold between are you watching a TV show or is this a game? The voice acting, fantastic. The facial animations, insane. But because of those graphical issues I mentioned earlier, it's going to be an 8 out of 10 for me. The sound design is absolutely nut splitting. I played through this game on a high-end Dolby Atmos soundbar with 2 satellite speakers and a subwoofer. Sounded fantastic. I also popped in the Pulse 3D headset for a while, which does work with the Tempest audio engines of the PS5 to take advantage of that pumped in virtual surround that the PS5 likes to do. The sound design works in conjunction with the graphics. What you see and what you hear works together to put you in the position, in the boots of these characters. Some things that stood out to me during the AC-130 mission, because of course there's an AC-130 mission and it's actually pretty good. You do spend a little too much time in the air, I would say. I kind of wanted it to end like 5 minutes earlier than it did. When you're raining hell from above with the 24mm or whatever you're dumping down there, 40 mil, AC-130, take your pick of armaments. When you're raining hellfire from above, you can hear from your teammates' comms on their helmets on the ground, your airstrikes making contact with the ground. It's sick.
Rounds away.
Fire for effect.
Also, there were a couple moments where bullets are whizzing by your head, or you might fetch one in your body armor, and it just sounds good. I'm not supposed to use the word good as a reviewer. You're supposed to bust out the thesaurus and get real articulate. It was an elegant bowl of audio soup that was served with no spoon. The sound design is insane. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. It was insanely immersive. Hey, speaking of audio, for the longest time I was rocking the Shure SM7B over here. This is like what Joe Rogan runs on his podcast and whatnot. Very popular mic with the streamers and YouTubers. Switched switched over to the Rode Pod mic. How's it sound? Any different? Did you even notice a damn difference? It definitely does look cooler, for sure. The soundtrack is a group effort from Sarah Shaner, who's the composer. I probably just butchered her name, I apologize. And then Mike Dean, who's the producer. And unfortunately, I did hear that there were a lot of disagreements between the two. I'm going to share this article here. And unfortunately, Sarah did quit after working on this project, but I will say their work was phenomenal with this project and one of the best soundtracks that I've heard in a video game, period. And that is because of the way that the soundtrack perfectly blended with those sound effects, the sound design that I just mentioned in the previous section, to where it actually came together almost like it was perfectly designed, to where, like, I was thinking to myself, what if I had dicked around in that open world area and not gotten to this little base for this exciting gunfight right when the music hit this spot? So it makes me think like the songs are dynamic, like they come in louder and cooler and stuff during gunfights. You'll realize, dang, this soundtrack's really picking up and shredding in the background when I'm shredding and dumping mags and stuff. It really does add to the immersion. It was good. 10 out of 10 for me. Perfect soundtracks. Unfortunately, the Sarah quit, but damn. As for the settings, I'm not going to spend too much time here because I spent a lot of time there in the settings. It is incredibly in-depth. One thing I was a little bit surprised by, there is no graphical modes on the PS5. There is a 120 hertz mode, which I of course had engaged, but there is no like fidelity mode that focuses on sheer graphical fidelity, beautiful graphics, reflections, textures, but you're at like 30 or 60 frames per second. Hopefully not 30. We're taking a step back there. And then what I would keep it in, which is a performance mode, which targets, 60 or 120 hertz, the higher frame rate for when I'm slapping noobs and whatnot, because that's all I can slap is noobs. If like another player that's actually good gets into a 1v1 with me, it's over. I'm back in the lobby. Oh, geez. But I kind of like that there wasn't that switch or toggle, because guess what? It looked beautiful and I was at 120 FPS, pretty much locked the whole game. As for controller features, I did purchase this game on PS5 so I could enjoy those robust features of the PS5 DualShock. DualShock, what the DualSense controller? Call yourself the controller captain and have a slip up like that on camera, do ya? DualShock. This is the Hyper HYPR DualSense controller, which I had in my hand for about 90% of the playthrough. Little control freak cosmic white on the right. Now, when I first launched the game, I had the Scuff Reflex Pro in my hand because that has actual squeezable linear triggers, as where these are mechanical digital switches similar to a mouse click. Great for multiplayer, but during the story, I want to feel that immersion of the guns having different trigger breaking points and stuff. So I gave that a taste with the Scuff Reflex Pro as well as the AIM V3. It was awesome. Then I was like, okay, cool. Now I can switch over to the Hyper. That's exactly what I did. This still has the haptic feedback, which is that very immersive vibration. Felt great through the entire game. But I will say the DualSense features, that being the haptic feedback, the adaptive triggers that get stiffer or lighter depending what's going on the screen, didn't stand out quite as much as Sony Interactive Entertainment first-party titles like Ratchet and Clank, Returnal, Spider-Man, Miles Morales, etc. I don't know why I said it like that. Miles Morales. But that's to be expected as this is a third-party title. I'm going to go ahead and give controller features a 3 out of 5. As for performance, I'm going to focus on the platform that I played on, which is PlayStation 5. I have heard PC performance is quite solid, but if you want an insane in-depth analysis, Digital Foundry is definitively the place to go for technical analysis of games like that. If you want a foul-mouthed ex-sailor to come in here and tell you what the business is, that's what I'm here for. I'm not getting abused or anything. I've been paintballing here recently. Now things are getting fun. Now the action's heating up. I'm going to get into a little 1v1 spicy battle popping out with this gentleman over here in Fort. Just go ahead and post out and start ramping. Back right. Back right's out. Back right's out. At 70,000 subscribers, which is happening in like a couple days, I'm actually launching a second channel called Paintball Heaven, which is going to be a featured channel. So if you're into paintball content, check that out as well. Performance on the PlayStation 5 was very good, except for the graphical issues that I mentioned, like the texture and asset pop-in, but I had 0 crashes. I also didn't notice any frame rate chug, no screen tearing or lag or anything weird like that. And best of all, every time I hit that little settings button on my LG Magic Remote, stupid gimmicking name, it pops up that little game overlay that LG TVs have and shows you it has a frame rate counter. And I was at like 118, 120 the entire game, even when a lot of shit was happening on screen. Sick. I did find this article mentioning that some gamers were having issues actually getting 120 hertz output on their PS5. I'm gonna line up the text right here. You know what? I'm gonna zoom in as well and go ahead and pause the screen. Do this right here. And this will fix her up for you good. I didn't have to do any of this. It just, I checked the little tick box that said, you want 120 hertz? I said, of course. Do I like air? Of course I want 120 hertz, sweetheart. As soon as I ticked that box, hit the little button on my TV, it was like, yep, you jumped from 60 to 120. Enjoy the game, Kevin. And I did. I did watch Digital Foundry's entire frame rate analysis on all the consoles, Xbox Series S and X, PS5, PC, etc. They did mention that in some of the wide open areas when you're sniping and whatnot, it did dip down into the 95 range on the PS5. However, VRR did smooth that out. I didn't even notice it. Every time I checked the frame rate, it was always at like 118, 120. And even if you are dipping down to like the 90s, that's still so dang smooth, especially on console when we're used to just seeing like 60 frames per second. It looks buttery smooth. The multiplayer is more robust than ever because you not only have traditional 6v6 mid-size maps, but you also have these huge battle maps, which are going to be little pieces of the Warzone Battle Royale map for large 32 versus 32 matches for the mode Ground War. But if you want something smaller, tighter, fast-paced, where you kill, respawn, work on your snap shooting and whatnot, then you can play what's called Shoot House. I have some visual aids pulled up here, which is a really tight, small map. So make a good paintball map, by the way. But if you just want numbers, there are 16 launch maps. It is slightly confusing because there are traditional 6v6 maps, 12 of them to be specific. Then you have maps that only launch with specific seasons and then are pulled out or benched when the next season launches. If you're looking for large ground war maps, something like what you're accustomed to with the Battlefield series, which is funny because the gaming community is actually saying that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is delivering a much better, huge open ground war experiences with vehicle combat, better than Battlefield, which has traditionally been their bread and butter. So that's just funny to me. But if you're looking for those large experiences, you do have these 5 maps here. I don't understand how 6v6 would be hosted on track. It's way too big. You would be running around not seeing anybody for like ever until you get sniped from across the map. But here's by the numbers: 11 traditional 6v6 core maps, 5 large 32 versus 32 ground war maps. Here are the launch modes. Keep in mind, there are going to be LTMs or limited time modes that come out with each season, such as like hide and seek and stuff like that. But this is what you're going to get constantly. This is the bread and butter. This is what you're going to be grinding. Now, season 1 multiplayer is here. We do have Shoot House, which is pretty fast-paced little small map, and then you have Shipment, which is going to be launching mid-season, and that is going to be the metal cargo container shifting around on a ship in the middle of the ocean. This rating or grade might change as I spend more time in the multiplayer. However, as of now, if I'm going to slap a badge or rating on it, I am going to give it a 7 out of 10, having 16 launch maps, which are actually pretty good. I can't think of any maps off the top of my dome that I just hated. And granted, I picked up the game a month after launch, so a lot of those initial launch bugs and glitches have already been smoothed out. A lot of those server issues have been fixed with the day 1 patch, and then also all the concurrent patches that I missed. For me, multiplayer's been great so far. 7 out of 10. And that 7 out of 10 includes everything. So the ground war big maps, the shoot house small maps, regular 6v6. But again, separate comprehensive reviews for all these modes because I think they deserve it. There's a lot to talk about here. As for endgame or replayability, I think that this Call of Duty title actually stands above the pack because not only do you have traditional modes like multiplayer, campaign, or story mode, and then Black Ops would have zombies, and Modern Warfare games usually have Spec Ops, little couch co-op action. But there's 2 additional fat, juicy modes, which are actually going to get the most content pumped into them over the next few years, and that is going to be DMZ and Warzone BR, Warzone 2.0 BR. The Battle Royale is literally the cash cow of the Call of Duty franchise currently. You know, gamers really tend to enjoy that genre, so there's going to be a shitload of support pumped into that. DMZ is a new mode. I personally, thus far, am very excited for it, but the presentation isn't really very polished and isn't there just yet, but the hopes are fucking high. I'm gonna tell you what you need to hear about the multiplayer and DMZ and co-op and all that other good stuff right here, right now, because this is the review video, but I am going to do a separate deep dive or comprehensive review into the DMZ mode, Warzone 2.0, and traditional multiplayer mode. I have to give replayability and end-game content a 10 out of 10 because of that fact. There's going to be a ton of support in this game, and DMZ mode is going to allow you to spend a shitload of time playing this game. I don't really believe there's a lot of replayability to the campaign. It wasn't like so gosh darn memorable that I'm like, oh god, I gotta replay it again on a higher difficulty. But shoot, Call of Duty traditionally, I believe for most gamers, has been you play the story once or twice, and then you spend hundreds of hours in the multiplayer or zombies or Spec Ops mode. I'm giving Modern Warfare 2 deuce, not a 2. I'm not giving it a 2. That'd be really low. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. Really good Call of Duty title. MW2 is linked in the description below. I hope you Stallions and Stallionettes have a fantastic day. Drop in the comment section below, aka the stable, your opinion of this title as well as the whole Call of Duty franchise. What was your favorite COD title from your childhood? I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow.
If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the Stallions and Stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.